You think growing up in a preacher's home is all blessings and sermons. Think again. Paul Morton's son is finally speaking out, revealing secrets about his childhood that the public has never heard. From hidden struggles to shocking family dynamics, what he's about to share will change the way you see life inside the pulpit. And trust me, this is just the beginning. You won't believe what happened next. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a story that has shocked the gospel and religious community. Paul Morton's son has broken his silence, revealing a side of life as a preacher's kid that most people never see. While the outside world often imagines a life filled with privilege, guidance, and spiritual mentorship, insiders say the reality can be far more complicated. In this video, we'll explore the untold details of growing up under the intense scrutiny of a high-profile preacher. From hidden struggles with expectations to moments that tested his faith and identity. This story pulls back the curtain on life behind the pulpit. You won't believe some of the revelations, including the pressures, the sacrifices, and the personal truths that were kept hidden for years. Stay with us because by the end of this video, you'll understand why this story matters. Not just for Paul Morton's family, but for anyone who's ever wondered what it's really like to grow up in a preacher's household. This is where it gets interesting, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single detail. Growing up as the son of Paul Morton, a highly respected pastor and influential figure in the gospel community, came with both privileges and immense pressures. From a young age, his life was anything but ordinary. While other kids were navigating school and friendships, he was constantly aware that his actions, words, and even his demeanor were being watched, not only by family, but by the broader church community. Friends and family recall that he was expected to embody the values and image of a preacher's household at all times. Every Sunday service, community gathering, and family appearance came with expectations that could feel overwhelming for a child. Simple mistakes were not just personal. They could reflect on his father, on the ministry, and on the entire congregation. But beyond the public expectations, sources suggest there were private challenges that few ever knew about. The high standards set for him often left him feeling isolated, even in his own home. While many assume that a preacher's child automatically enjoys spiritual guidance and support, insiders say that the constant scrutiny and pressure to perform spiritually can create internal conflict, doubt, and stress. Interestingly, Paul Morton's son also spoke about the contrast between public perception and private reality. On the outside, the family appeared perfect, respected, devoted, and loving. But inside, there were struggles that weren't visible to the congregation. He describes moments of frustration, confusion, and even resentment as he tried to reconcile his personal feelings with the high expectations placed on him. Education and social life were also affected. Friends from school recall that he often missed social events due to church responsibilities or family expectations. Extracurricular activities were limited, not because of lack of interest, but because of the commitment required by his father's ministry. These experiences shaped his identity in unique ways, teaching resilience but also creating pressures that many children never face. Perhaps the most striking part of his early life was the duality of visibility and invisibility. On one hand, he was a public figure in his own right, constantly seen and observed by the congregation. On the other hand, his personal struggles and feelings were largely invisible, confined to private spaces and unspoken conversations. This tension, being highly visible yet personally unheard, is a recurring theme he later reveals in interviews and personal statements. But here's the shocking part that many fans did not know. He claims that some moments of his childhood included experiences that left long-lasting emotional impacts, moments that were rarely discussed in public or even within the family. The story gets more revealing when we explore his teenage years and the specific challenges that shaped his adult perspective. In the next chapter, we'll dive into his adolescence, revealing how the pressures intensified during his teenage years, the conflicts that arose with peers and mentors, and the moments that would ultimately lead him to speak out about life as a preacher's kid. You won't want to miss the details that shed light on his emotional journey and the truth behind the public image of the Morton family. As Paul Morton's son entered his teenage years, the pressures of growing up in a preacher's house is a period of self-discovery and independence for any young person. But for him, these natural experiences were complicated by the public and spiritual expectations that came with being a pastor's child. Every action was under scrutiny, every decision weighed against moral and spiritual standards, and every misstep felt magnified by the eyes of the congregation. Friends and classmates recall that he often struggled to balance the ordinary experiences of teenage life with the extraordinary demands of church life. Hanging out with peers, dating, or expressing personal opinions became complicated when he constantly had to consider how it might reflect on his father's reputation or the family's ministry. Sources say that these pressures created feelings of isolation and anxiety as he navigated the fine line between being a normal teenager and fulfilling his perceived duties as a preacher's son. One of the most revealing aspects he later shared is the conflict between personal desires and family expectations. He describes moments when he wanted to explore typical teenage experiences, sports, music, friendships, yet felt restrained by the need to appear perfect in the eyes of the church. Even seemingly small acts, like attending a friend's party or expressing frustration, were often met with guilt or reprimand. This constant self-monitoring left him questioning his own identity and the authenticity of his relationships. Another challenge during these years was the internalization of spiritual responsibility. Paul Morton's son often felt that he had to embody the values of faith and righteousness at all times, even when he was struggling personally. While his father's guidance was rooted in faith and good intentions, the intensity of this spiritual expectation became a source of stress. He recalls feeling emotionally burdened, carrying not just his own struggles, but also the weight of upholding the family image. The pressure extended beyond emotional and spiritual realms. Academically, socially, and creatively, he often felt confined by the roles expected of him. Some insiders note that this environment sometimes fostered rebellion in subtle ways, small acts of independence or questioning authority, which in the eyes of the congregation could be interpreted as disrespect or defiance. The tension between private self-expression and public expectation was a recurring theme in his adolescent life. Perhaps most importantly, Paul Morton's son began to notice the double standards and hidden challenges that many preachers' kids face. While church members assumed his life was filled with blessings, inspiration, and spiritual insight, he often faced emotional struggles that were rarely acknowledged. Loneliness, self-doubt, and the fear of disappointing others became recurring challenges. He has openly admitted that these experiences shaped his worldview, teaching him resilience but also leaving emotional scars that lingered well into adulthood. The teenage years also brought him into direct contact with peer judgment and societal expectations. Outside of the church, he faced typical teen challenges, but the added layer of being publicly tied to a prominent pastor intensified scrutiny. Every decision, from school activities to friendships, was subject to additional pressure, creating a constant sense of tension and the need to navigate life carefully. And here's a revelation that really shocks people. He claims that some of the most pivotal moments of conflict weren't public incidents at all, but private struggles with self-identity and the expectations of a high-profile faith community. These personal battles, often invisible to the public eye, shaped his emotional development and later inspired him to speak out. He emphasizes that life as a preacher's kid is not always the picture-perfect experience that outsiders assume. It can be isolating, demanding, and emotionally complex. As Paul Morton's son transitioned into early adulthood, the pressures and expectations that had defined his teenage years did not simply disappear, they evolved. The same environment that had shaped his childhood now presented new challenges as he tried to carve out his own identity, pursue personal ambitions, and navigate relationships while remaining tethered to the public perception of a preacher's household. One of the earliest realizations he shares is that the public often has a limited understanding of what life inside a pastor's home entails. From a distance, it appears structured, disciplined, and spiritually uplifting. Yet, he reveals that much of his early adult life was spent negotiating the tension between public duty and private desires. There were moments when he felt trapped, like he was living two lives simultaneously. One for the congregation and aspirations became a delicate balancing act. He explains that while he respected his father's ministry and understood the importance of church responsibilities, he also yearned to pursue his own path, away from constant public scrutiny. This included exploring opportunities that were not directly tied to the church or ministry work. According to him, making these choices required courage, as any perceived misstep could spark judgment or disappointment from those who watched his family closely. Relationships were another arena of complexity. Romantic relationships, friendships, and even casual social interactions were often filtered through the lens of his family's religious and social expectations. He recalls instances where peers questioned whether he could truly be normal outside of the church, creating an added layer of social pressure. The scrutiny extended beyond family and friends. Online communities and church members also had opinions about how a preacher's son should behave, what choices he should make, and how he should present himself publicly. Perhaps the most profound part of his early adult years was the internal struggle with identity and self-expression. He describes moments of doubt, frustration, and even resentment, feelings that were difficult to reconcile with the public image of a faithful and obedient pastor's child. Despite this, he credits his upbringing for instilling resilience, a strong sense of responsibility, and an awareness of how to navigate public perception, a skill that would later prove crucial when he decided to speak out. The turning point, he reveals, came when he realized that silence was no longer an option. For years, he had carried the weight of unspoken truths, emotions, and experiences that had shaped him but remained hidden from public view. The decision to share his story was not motivated by anger or rebellion, but by a desire for honesty, understanding, and the opportunity to shed light on the real experiences of preachers' kids, an often overlooked and misunderstood group. He also emphasizes that speaking out was about empowerment. By sharing his personal journey, he hoped to create dialogue, foster empathy, and encourage others in similar situations to acknowledge their own struggles. It was about breaking the stigma that life in a preacher's household is automatically perfect or easy, and showing that even children of prominent spiritual leaders face complex emotional and social challenges. And here's where it gets even more revealing. He doesn't just speak about struggles in general. He details specific incidents, family dynamics, and emotional moments that shaped his outlook. From moments of feeling unheard in his household to witnessing the immense pressures placed on his parents, he offers a perspective rarely discussed publicly. These insights provide a raw and authentic look at the realities behind the pulpit, challenging assumptions and sparking conversation among fans and the broader gospel community. But the story doesn't stop there. In the next chapter, we will explore the public reactions to his revelations, the controversies that followed, and how this disclosure has impacted both his personal life and the perception of his family within the gospel community. You won't want to miss the responses that shocked fans and ignited widespread discussion about life behind the pulpit. Once Paul Morton's son went public with his revelations about growing up in a preacher's household, the response was immediate and intense. Social media erupted with discussions, debates, and heated commentary. Fans of the Morton family, members of the broader gospel community, and even casual observers all weighed in, creating a viral conversation that spanned Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Many people were shocked by the candid nature of his statements, while some viewers expressed sympathy, acknowledging the immense pressures faced by children in prominent religious households. Others criticized him for airing private family matters in public. Hashtags and trending topics emerged almost immediately, with some praising his honesty and others questioning his timing or motives. One popular hashtag that gained traction was hashtag #PreacherSkitTruth, which allowed people to share their own experiences or reactions to the story. Commentators and gospel vloggers dissected his words line by line. Some focused on the emotional impact of growing up under constant scrutiny, while others analyzed the implications for Paul Morton's public image. The conversation extended beyond just the Morton family. It opened a wider discussion about the experiences of preachers' kids in general. Many viewers related personally, sharing stories of their own struggles growing up in religious households where expectations often outweigh also weighed in, offering insights into the psychological and social pressures that children of high-profile spiritual leaders often face. Therapists and life coaches noted that growing up constantly observed and expected to adhere to strict moral and spiritual standards can lead to anxiety, self-doubt, and long-term emotional challenges. They highlighted how Paul Morton's son's willingness to speak openly could encourage others in similar situations to seek help, support, or simply the freedom to share their own experiences. Interestingly, some public figures in the gospel community expressed cautious support. They emphasized that while personal matters should be handled with care, transparency can create understanding and dialogue. Several noted that his revelations challenged the assumption that children of pastors automatically have perfect, carefree lives. This sparked debates about generational differences, parenting approaches, and the balance between public ministry and private family life. Social media wasn't the only platform where reactions occurred. Online forums, blogs, and comment sections of gospel news sites were flooded with discussions. Some argued that the revelations could impact the family's ministry, while others praised the courage it took to share deeply personal experiences. Many viewers expressed gratitude, saying that his honesty could help break stigmas and encourage open conversations about mental health, emotional well-being, and the real-life pressures behind church life. But here's the twist that shocked many insiders. Despite the controversies, there were reports of private reconciliation efforts between him and his family. While public debate raged, sources claim that the Morton family engaged in honest conversations behind closed doors, addressing emotions, misunderstandings, and long-standing pressures. This duality, the public airing of struggles and private attempts at healing, added complexity to the story and sparked even more discussion about transparency versus discretion in religious families. Perhaps most importantly, his story highlighted a larger cultural conversation about the role of preachers' children in faith communities. How much freedom should they have to define their own lives? How do congregations respond when the private experiences of prominent families are exposed? And what lessons can be learned from these revelations about empathy, understanding, and supporting children growing up in high expectation environments? These questions have fueled ongoing dialogue and continue to resonate with audiences worldwide.